series of videos on a bit of miniature painting. Something a bit unusual, well, not for this place. So the one we've picked is nice and simple, your basic bog standard Primaris Space Marine. This is the plastic easy build model, which is currently being sent out with, or was sent out with the Warhammer Alliance set, and you can find it in lots of quick how to paint box sets as well. Is only a few part miniature, body, torso, head, arm and backpack, and a textured base. And what we're going to do with this particular project, build and paint, is we're going to try and use as few simple base paints as possible and get a nice result with some simple techniques. Something that you can easily achieve yourself, we would hope. So let's crack on, and we'll start off with, we're probably going to do blue. I think we've got blues and yellows and gold, so we'll do a basic blue Space Marine with armoured pieces and gauntlets and maybe some gold trim. So let's crack on. We're going to be using a mixture of brushes, so using some Citadel paints in this case. Of course, many other paints are available. We have just a black, a blue, and a yellow. And brush-wise, we're going to be using, in this case, Element Games Regiment brush, which is a good all-round brush, decent tip, good for fine detail work and also larger areas. Quite a straightforward dry brush for the dry brushing effect we'll do later. So these are the two brushes we're going to be using. Off we go. Now I'm using a wet palette here, but for the moment we're just going to start off and get the base colours on. So it's going to be legs, pauldrons and so on. So let's just neatly fill that in. As the great Duncan Rhodes says, we're using a slightly thinned down paint from the actual pot. As you see, it's got very, very good pigment and it covers quite well. Keeping it as neat as we can, and my own technique is, where possible, just leave a little bit of the black undercoat in between where there's going to be two areas of colour. Shoulder pads are nice, easy bits to start with, give you an idea of how the colour goes on. Obviously, if you use different undercoats, that gives you different effects. So you can use metallic undercoats and then use a sort of a thinner speed paint or a wash over the top. That tends to give a nice metallic hue to it. So you can bring purple, red metallics, green metallics, whatever you fancy. Or you can simply use metallic paints from various metallic paint ranges. I would always recommend, if you're using a metallic paint, a black undercoat tends to bring out the metallic pigment a lot better than white, so it just makes it pop a lot more on the model. Right. There we go. Let's move on. I'm going to leave the sort of connecting areas between his armour plates black for the moment. We might just give those a little brush or something later on, but don't need to be worrying too much about those. And the hip guards there. I'm sure any medieval reenactors will tell me exactly what that particular piece of armour is technically called. What have we got under here? We've got belt as well. I'm going to sort of lightly brush across that just to pick out the edges, not worry too much about it. And just under here you can see I'm just going to just pick out the edge there. Don't need to be too detailed underneath, because of course you're not really going to see that in really great detail. And I'm just using sort of the edge of the brush here just to sort of flick the paint across the edges, especially where you've got a lot of little detail on these bits here. So you don't want it to be too thick and fill that in. You want to make sure it gets a good 3D effect. And some poor sculptors spent hours sculpting this, so it'd be a shame to fill in all their hard work. So let's just go around now. You can go do all the front and do all the back, or sort of go round and round in circles. I tend to try and do each piece at a time. Now, with Space Marines, obviously there's lots of armour panels and plates, so there's a lot of lining work can be done, but we're going to get around that by dry brushing from the top down, and that should just give us our highlights enough that it's going to look good enough to get on a tabletop. We're just battle ready, and that's all you really need. Obviously, if you're doing character models or special squad leaders, then you can always go back and do a little more detail. Let's just pour a bit more detail on that. I just put a bit more paint on the edges there, just where the light's going to catch it. Let's do the central belt piece there, around the back. We'll do along the hoses, just lightly brush across the hoses there, so it just picks up on the edges. Again, it's almost dry brushing it from the start. And you've got some sort of pouches here, so we'll do those a brown leathery look later on. Let's just do the back of this. Rear armour, bum flap I suppose you could say. Then we'll do the same around there. We'll maybe move on to the helmet. Actually, let's do the throat guard. Comes around here, and we're going to keep the paint off the chest eagle. This is the sort of aquila here. We're going to try and keep that off there as much as we can. And we'll probably do that, and we can do that nice and straightforward and just do it pick it out in gold. I think we do have a yellow, but gold is enough, and that'll just come up quite nicely. So again, faceplate and helmet, we're just going to sort of brush that. Again, just sort of almost flicking the brush across, lightly, just picking out the detail. And then we're going to do the same up like that, and down, just as you see, almost using the edges of the brush. Just picking out the top and leaving a bit of shading in it already. And that's giving quite a nice effect already, isn't it? Nice and simple. And we'll just do the same. Ooh, make sure I can see it. Well, you can see it. Flip up there. There. Now, you can, oops, just clean my brush a bit. Now, you can obviously use a specific dry brush, but in all fairness, one good quality brush like this can dry brush as well as detail. So I'm just going to put a bit of paint on, wipe a little bit of it off, or most of it off. I'm just going to keep doing that here. Oh, a little bit too much there actually. See, just if it's a bit too watery, not too dry, hence the term, it will come out a bit weird. So let's just look a little around again, inside of there. Hopefully you can all see that okay. Alright, that's coming along quite nicely. Straight away it's looking the part. What we'll do is we'll do arms and around the feet and the backpack, and then we'll come back for the next stage after that. So again, we're just going to larger areas, we're just going to paint those down. We may decide to do some different colours on different parts, like the knee pad areas here, but we can make that choice a bit later on when we decided what this Marine's heraldry is going to be. Blue tends to be for ultramarines, but we can always do a successor chapter, or indeed even our own chapter of our own devising, or something comedic, or whatever. I mean, blue and yellow always been colours of the Earl of Chester, so we could give a sort of historical slant to it, or use some historical inspiration. Let's flip that over there. And what we may do is we may use a little bit of a wash. Null oil is a nice simple one to use, it's not too bad. You can always use browns as well, or black inks, but we'll probably use a bit of null oil just at the end, just to line out any details and just give it a little bit of simple shading, just to make him look the part. As for the base itself, we can probably just dry brush that with a grey and make it look like the rubble of some imperial planet which has been saved from destruction by the brave space marines, or highly likely its inhabitants put to the sword due to some inferred heresy. No one ever said the grimdark future was a nice place to live. Right, just doing that. There we go. A little bit more around the sides. Again, we're not going for Golden Demon award winning here, we're just going for good tabletop standard, one that can get to roll dice and have some fun in a game. Maybe one that can test out a colour scheme to do a full army with later on. There's also a leg on these though. There we go. Missed the back bit there, let's go around there. Okay, I'm going to see again, I'm just sort of almost dry brushing on as well, so I'm just building up a bit more layers of colour just on the edges and the raised areas, but we will do a proper dry brush stage secondarily, and that'll just highlight the whole thing. So let's do his arms as well. We'll leave off the little purity seal, oath of moment, on the edge there. Let's just lightly brush that. Again, a little bit of paint. Wipe most of it off and just flick very lightly so it picks up, and then what we're going to do is just fill in a little bit more paint on the actual large panelled areas like that, and around the wrist. I think that's giving us the right effect, not forgetting up the top there. Just give a little bit more of a go around there and down the back, and that's going to be mostly in shade down there, so that's not a big problem if it misses. We'll do a little bit more at the top of the helmet and around the front of the faceplate as well. Just build up the pigment and the layers there. I think he's coming along quite nicely already. Definitely looking the part. Right, let's just do around the back of this bit. And again, your own preference for how detailed you do underneath. I'm not saying that I've painted the inside of hats sometimes, but if you feel like it, you certainly can. But on the whole, if it's not going to be seen, if it's going to be seen from 2 or 3 feet away on a tabletop, arm's length is good enough, especially if you're just starting out and you're just having a go. Or certainly arm's length is good enough to start with, and then you can always go back and super detail it later. Let's put some more colour there, a bit there, let's block that bit in. And we'll just do the brush lightly across his fingers where he's holding the gun. Like that. Underneath. Okay, and just do a bit more light. Let's I like dry brushing all over. Oh well, you know what? Just need to do the backpack, and then that's that stage done. Didn't take long at all. So again, I'm just going to wipe a bit more off. I have to put a bit more on my finger there. So it's coming out very dry, and then we're just going to flick it from the top down, like across and across, so you get the opposite angle to the detail where you can. Just paint it in a bit more detailed on those bits. Again, we'll be dry brushing from the top down in the next stage to get all that blue nicely coloured in. There's some shading on it, or highlighting in this case, with some dry brushing, and then we'll just pick out the detail. And things like the vents we'll do with a bit of oil, keep it nice and simple. Might brush a little bit of metallic over those, and then some oil, and that's a nice, quick, simple way of showing the metallic bits of the, well, essentially the nuclear reactor he's carrying on his backpack to power his suit. Not quite sure how it works in law, but I'm pretty certain that it probably uses more power than some civilizations have used in lifetimes just to keep his suit going for an hour. Relics of the dark ages of technology. Right, that's fairly straightforward and gives us a nice blue. And there we go, that's taken, what, about a quarter of an hour, and we've got a very, very, very basic base coloured marine. So we'll just neaten that up, go around any areas that need just maybe a little bit more coats, and we'll come back and do the dry brushing in a sec. See you soon. Hey, welcome back. So we've put our base colours on and let it dry, in this case the blue. And so now we're going to use a lighter blue just to do a little dry brush to highlight. In this case I'm actually using this one, this layer Techless Blue, but obviously you could simply mix some white with whatever colour you'd used as your base colour, just to get a highlighting colour in there. So again, we're going to put just a little bit on the tip of the brush, not too much, just enough, and wipe the vast majority of it off. It seems a bit wasteful, but the effect is what we're looking for here. So just scrub it off on a bit of paper towel at the side here, a bit of kitchen towel will do. So it's almost gone, and then what let's do is we're going to dry brush down from the top to get a highlight effect and see how it works. Not a method I use very much, but for the sake of this, we're going to give it a bit of a go. Right. There we go. Straight away, you can see we're just picking out the top edges. Now, with an armoured warrior like this, when there's lots of nice sharp edges to pick up, you'll find that it does do quite a nice job. So let's just brush along the arms there, the arm here again, from the top down if possible, and we're going to do the same on the pauldron, so literally flicking down and very slowly building up layers of a slightly lighter colour as we move around, and leaving obviously that black line in between the pauldron and the actual rim of the pauldron. And I'll just do that. So, yeah, I mean, with this we can really go from the top of the model all the way down to the bottom like that. And that's a fairly quick job. We're going to do the backpack as well. Any metal bits we will just go over with the metal, but we'll do that as a separate stage later. What we're doing is just getting in a little bit more colour and highlighting. It's kind of a simple way to get edge highlights. Now you can literally get a brush and take your lighter colour and line each individual panel. Gives a very nice effect, very crisp. If you see lots of the heavy metal style painters will do that, but if you're looking to just get your models on the tabletop quickly with a nice effect, you can always do it this way. And remember, you can always go around with the original blue or whatever colour you've used as your base colour, and you can always neaten it up later. That's a good thing with paints. If you make an error, just have your other paints on standby, and you can always just bob round and neaten them up later. So as you see, I'm just literally flicking it, sort of brushing it very lightly, just so it picks up on the edges of all the armour. I'm going to turn him around and just do that way a bit as well. Okay, so actually looking at how the armour plates are and making sure that you just pick out the colour that you're doing, just picks out on the raised edges and avoids the flat edges as much. The sort of curved surfaces of the shoulder pads are a little bit more problematic, but you're literally just going to, almost like a makeup brush I suppose, just sort of splodge it on. Little circles also does quite nicely, just to sort of build up layers of colour on the top. And I think that looks like he's starting to look a little bit more three-dimensional already. So we'll just flick underneath there as well. This other shoulder pad, and look, I've actually not reloaded my brush with paint. This is just the initial bit, the initial load up that we did. And there's done basically a whole model without needing to go back. Because again, while it feels a bit wasteful of paint, in some ways it's actually quite an efficient way of using it. Because it's literally just picking up little bits of pigment with each flick of the brush and just putting it on the areas where it needs to be. There we go. A bit more around here. Again, we're going to flick over. It'll go on the black rim, but we're going to tidy up the black rim and then just maybe put some metallic around that just to pick out the edges of his shoulder pads in the traditional ultramarine blue and gold manner. Let's put a bit more around the edge there. Other methods as well. You can literally take the blue or the lighter colour and just go round the edge of the pad, and that looks quite nice as well. That's a very traditional way of doing it, but a lot more people are just using a lot of dry brushing now, because for a while dry brushing went very, very out of fashion in the I'd say in the late 90s into the 2000s. Almost a dirty word, but now a lot of people are getting back into that. I mean, we won't mention slap chop for the moment because that's a bit more complicated, well, a bit simpler, but if you're using speed paints, then obviously this is basically a stage of slap chopping, and you could go over with a colour afterwards to sort of blend the two areas together. But as we're just using some basic, very basic paints, as you might do for a club starting session, we're just going to keep it nice and straightforward. Just brush and flick some in his faceplate there. I'll pick out the grill. There we are, and that's starting to look really pretty cool. I like that one. These are nice models anyway, but certainly look the part. Just a bit of a flicker across the back as well. And I think, whoop, there we go. 5 or 6 minutes, and that's that stage pretty much done. Again, when we put some wash on the edges, that's going to bring out some of the detail as well. So I'll just put a little bit more on these areas here, because obviously the light's coming down and catching there. So just from the top down, maybe put a little bit more paint on the brush here, actually, just a little more. And we're just going to go from the top down, just put a little bit more on him. Just build up those layers nicely. Yeah, around there. The top vents. Yeah, just literally flip from the top down. It'll do most of the work for you. His hand, other hand there, his fingers. As he's grasping his bolt gun, bolt rifle with both hands firmly there. The knee pad, just work that round in a circle. There we go. And again, just around the back of those greaves. I think is the bit of greaves, sabatons are your feet. I think greaves is around the shins. And I think that for the moment, a bit more of that shoulder pad maybe, just build up the layers a bit. There we are. I think for the moment that will do. So, pop back in a moment and we'll do some other details. I think what we'll do next is we'll just tidy up any areas in black. We'll do the bolt gun and the chest aquila, and maybe pick out a knee pad in a contrasting colour. So, there we go. Okay, so next we're just going to take a nice, back to our normal brush, and just a nice solid black, and anywhere where the dry brushing has gone over, scopes and so on, we're just going to just neaten that back up again, back to black, as it were. any other details like the edge of the shoulder pad here. So that's just going to get redone in black, just to help our metallic stage. To just go over that priority seal as well. We'll do some little effect on that towards the end just to make it look posh. And let's just put a black line there. Just tidies that up, ready for our next stage. Now I think what we'll do is we'll work from the inside out here. So I'm going to do the chest aquila first, because that's gold. And when that's done, we shouldn't be working anywhere near it or too close to it. Oops, a bit out of there. Luckily, to do wipe off with a very quick application of a little bit of finger. We tied it up like that. Just run the line around there. That's nice. While I'm here, just going to put a little bit of black in the eye socket, just to tidy that up, because I think later we'll maybe do those glowing red. A little bit black in there now is going to help, and just neaten those up. Again, we'll just wash the face area generally, and that'll do enough for that. We've got it's got these little equipment pouches at the back. I'll just put a little bit of black over those to neaten them up, or maybe we'll do those a little light brown, like a sort of leathery colour. Or we can do them black with a little bit of grey. Let's do them black and grey, shall we? So we'll just neaten those back up again with black, and the under bit as well. And then we'll just edge those out with some grey, just to make it look like a very black leather. Right, anywhere else that's going to get metalled, we're going to do that as well. So just these edges here of the vents for the backpack, we're just going to go over those in black. I think this piece here looks like it's probably going to be a metallic colour, so we're going to just re-blacken that, and that will pick out nicely when we do our metallic silver phase, or steel, whatever colour it is you decide to use for that. Again, the sort of venti grill bit on the top, just blacken that. Doesn't have to be too neat and tidy. You're going to get we'll leave these bits as sort of blue. Again, some wash around those will take care of that. And these bits here, we'll probably just leave those in blue colour as well. I think that'll be nice. Now, if you notice, we missed a bit of his thumb here. So what I'm literally going to do for that is take a little bit of the original blue that we went with. Also have a washed brush suitably. Don't want it to be too dark. Let's get a little bit of the dark blue and literally just paint it on his thumb. Now, knowing my luck, we'll get back to this and it'll get picked up by the silver again. So we're just going to neaten it up at this stage, and we may come back to it and neaten it later as well. So there we go, just thumb sticking out just where he's grasping the weapon. Just gives it that nice 3D effect there. Okay, so I think we've got most of the blackened bits done. Let's go and grab our gold first of all, and then our metallic silver, and we should be well away. So we're going to go with the gold aquila first of all on the chest plate. So again, I've just got my same normal brush. I put a little bit of gold on it. I'm going to wipe most of the gold off, so it's just showing a little bit left on my pad. And I'm going to actually, again, spin the model round this way. But I'm going to be just very lightly drawing the brush over the raised chest plate, and it should just pick up on the raised areas of the eagle's wings. Again, if we go over onto this bit, we can neaten that up later on. It's not a big problem. Like that and like that. And then, again, the more strokes of the brush you make, the more gold is transferred. So you just build it up nice and steady. You don't need to slap it on. Just build it nice and steady, and then just flick it. I think there's a little skull underneath there again. Doesn't need to be particularly detailed. We'll just build that up there very gently, and I think in a few seconds that's all we need for that. Let's spin him around. There we go. Now obviously we've caught a bit on the edge here, but that's not the problem. We're going to tidy that up later, and we will put a little bit of a wash over this as well, which will just neaten and tidy that area up. So there we go, one chest plate done in. Now we're just going to wash the brush, because of course we've been dry brushing, so it can start to do wear and tear just on the tip, but keeping it neat and tidy and washed frequently should keep a nice pointy tip on it, which is what you need for control and neatness. Now we're literally just going to go round these shoulder areas with the gold, just keep it neat and tidy. Again, as we put black on them before, you'll see how brightly the gold picks out. Again, not too thick, not too thin, and where possible, we're still trying to keep that little bit of black in between the areas of colour. It's the same sort of effect that cartoon artists do. If you look at Marvel comics, etc., they're basically black lined, which makes things stand out a bit. And already that's coming on quite well. Again, I tend to move, always have my hand and brush sort of the same angle, so sometimes I'll move the brush around to where I need it, but on the whole it's easier to move the model, so you're always painting down with a firm, controlled stroke. And if you're new to this, you'll pick up your own little tweaks and hacks. But whatever you do, don't worry too much about it. Just enjoy the process. What I would say to everyone is, whichever model you paint very, very first, when you've finished it, keep it somewhere safe. And years down the line, make sure you keep patient 0 on a shelf somewhere so you can see how far you've come, because no matter how good you do a model, you'll always improve every time you do one, and you'll always be pleased at your improvement, and you'll always be able to look back at that and say, wow, what a long way I've come. I think Stu's already got a picture of one of my first models, which I repainted not long after I started painting, and it's still not my finest hour, but at the time it was my finest hour. So there we go, there's some gold shoulder pads just quickly blocked in, looking quite neat and tidy there. I think what we'll do is we've got a little bit of some gold details might come nicely on the bolt there as well, but we'll do those later. So for the moment, I think we'll leave it at that, and we'll go to our metallic silver, which I happen to have not too far away. So let me just switch paints over. And I think we're just going to do a light dry brush with the same dry brush that we used before. Obviously that's a lot of blue in it, so I'll just give it a good wash out and a good clean. They do stain on the actual bristles on the brush, and don't worry about those too much. Now, again, I'm using a basic layer one. This is one very, very good. This is Iron Breaker, good standard silver, nothing too fancy. And again, same as we did last time, we're just going to get a little bit on the tip of the brush, wipe some off on the pot, and literally that's no more than that I'm using. You can see that very clearly. Let's see if we get, there we go. Very, very little bit on the tip, and then we're going to get most of it off, because this is going to just flick lightly over the gum and the metallic areas, so we're literally going to go over just like that. Maybe that's a little bit too much. Wipe a little bit more off if it gets like that. Over the barrel, over that, and you see I'm literally just very lightly passing that over the edges there. That's all you need to do for that. Now, a bit on the top there. So it literally looks like it's a very dirty gunmetal, because the black's doing a lot of the work for us. And we're literally just shading it. We might just pass it, a bit bluey that on the edges. Maybe. Again, we're going to have a little bit of a wash at the end, which will help tidy and neaten that up a bit. In the meantime, let's get a bit more of this silver. I'm going to just flick a little on the back here, just on the underside of the vents, on the top bit. And now we'll neat and tidy that up and do a few more little details. Okay, so neaten that up, just put a little bit of black in any areas where there's a little bit more metallic paint we really wanted, just so you've got the metal bits showing on the edges rather than on the flat areas there. Now, I've got a little bit of a grey going on here. I'll just put a little bit of grey and just edge around his little pouch at the back. I'm literally going to put the edge of the brush, literally almost edge on to where we need, and just run it along like that, so it is a very, very, very sharp edge highlight. Now, of course, that's a method that you can use around all the armour plates for Space Marine or any armoured warrior if you wished, but it does take rather a long time to do. Effect is very good, but we're aiming for quick and straightforward here. I'm just going to sort of blend that in a bit by just pushing some of the colour a bit out, just to make it look like the pouch is not entirely square. And there's a little bit of a pouch here. I'm going to just put some on the bottom, just to bring out the edge of the cylinder that it is. There we go. That looks like he's got a little pouch on the back. Now, what I might do, just for details here, I'm going to put, you can, of course, it's a very, very small drill and drill out the end of the bolt gun barrels, but I'm just going to do this with a little circle of black. Not quite as good, but it gives us the effect that we want. And if you're not confident with using very, very small drills on very, very small miniatures, that's probably the better way to do it. Now, I think where we're up to now is picking out some final details and then maybe giving it a wash and it's ready to go. And then we'll do the base. The base, we're just going to dry brush a nice grey colour to pick out all these bits of old Imperial Cathedral that have fallen on into rubble, and then we should be done. Right, a bit of detail work. So here's a nice flat red. This one's called Mephiston red, but any good standard scarlet will do you. So I think we'll do the wax pure bit of the purity seal in red. So we're just going to neatly go around that like that. We'll just bring a bit of highlights later. You could always, of course, start with a dark red and then just brush a little bit of light red over the top, or build up the layers. It's got a black undercoat, so you can build the layers up slowly on that. Now, eyeballs or lenses, bit everyone hates doing, but can be done. So I'm going to just put a little bit of red in, oops, let's get it lined up properly, here like that. Just doing little strokes just to build up the colour and making sure that I keep some black around the outside, and then you see he's got the startings of some glowing lenses seeking out the enemies of the Emperor. Right, oops, sorry, there we go. And let's do the other side again, the same. Again, moving this around so it's neat and tidy. These are quite large miniatures in terms of how big the detail is, so we're going to just fill that in there. I will show you a nice little trick to make those look cool later on. So again, just little strokes, building up the layers of colour. And then we've got some glowing eyes coming out there. That's good. Always try and go for, I mean, you could use a blue or a green, but we tend to find that a nice contrasting colour goes quite well. So if you've got a blue helmet, red lenses, red helmet, maybe green or blue lenses, something just to pick out the details and the difference. Right, where next? Oh, we need to do that, didn't we? There's a bit of, possibly a bit of gold on there. So again, clean our brush in between colours. He's got a little like a belt buckle under here as well. We could maybe do that. Pick that out gold just for some difference. So I'm going to load up a little bit of gold, and we're just going to put a little bit there, like that. Nothing mad. There we go. It's a little bit of interest there. And again, I'm going to wipe off quite a lot of the colour and just brush it. It's already got some silver on it from the dry brushing, so we're just going to pick out some silver on the edges just to make it look like there's a very definite little honorific or a badge on the bolt gun there. Now again, if you've got a separate scope here, we could also just lightly dry brush over the top, just so we've got a sort of goldish brassy scope. Yeah, that looks quite nice. And you sometimes find that your actual colour scheme, you can plan it out in advance, or you can kind of do it a bit on the hoof like this and go, do you know what, let's make that a bit different. And do you know what, that works quite well. I like that. We'll keep that. Now, we could, if you wanted as well, put a little dot of red for the laser sight on his bolt gun. So let's take a little bit, and there's the tip of the brush, and just dot that in red there. There's a little laser sight on the end of his gun. I think that works. Right, now I'm going to pop him down for a second, and we're going to switch colours, and we're going to get a parchment colour. In this case, I'm actually going to, now you could obviously use a white, or a white mixed with yellow, or you can just go straight for the cheats option, or the cheeky option, which I'm going to use a bone colour. This one's called a Screaming Skull. It's like sort of an off-white colour, but it looks quite good for parchment. So we're going to just demonstrate a little bit of a different technique on that, just to show how this works. I'm actually going to use a little bit of contrast on this. So just where the parchment is, I'm literally going to do bone colour there, and if you see there's a second bit of the parchment, again trying to keep a little black line in between the two, just like that, and we'll just do the edges and the underside, just a little light dry brushing there, and there we go. Straight away that looks like he's got a little wax seal hanging off his armour. That'll do there for now. Now again, these little stages are drying quite quickly, and we can clean our brushes quite quickly in between. So what I'm going to do now, to get the lens effect on his face, I'm going to put a little bit of yellow just in a corner and white in the other. Now the yellow we're going to put down the bottom. We can mix it in with a little bit of red to give a bit more of a sort of orangey red. In fact, I think we'll do that. That'll help. What I'm going to do is, where the lens is, I'm going to put a little bit of yellow just at the bottom area. Now it's going to take a little, one finger. It's going to take a little bit of careful positioning. So we're going to put this in just like that. And same on the other side, just in the front corner. So we're going to just draw the colour back a little, just to sort of blend it together. There we are. Now you can see the eyes seem to be glowing a bit more now, don't they? It's a little bit more sinister. And we'll put a little bit on this red dot. So again, using the same colour to do different parts is quite an efficient way of doing it. Now, what we need next is a white, and the effect will be complete. So I've got a little bit of white here. Just a pure, brilliant white. This one's actually a bold titanium white. This one's by AK acrylics, which are a nice set. But any white will do. And what I'm going to do is, on the laser dot, I'm going to put a dot just in the top corner. Tiniest little dot. And on the eyes, for the Space Marine, we're going to put the dot right at the back. So orange towards the front of the lens, white towards the back. Let's see if that gives us the effect that we're looking for. That should go. I'm just going to wipe a bit more paint off, just so I've got a very, very, very pointy tip. A very small amount of paint on. Anything like that. There we go. Instantly, that looks a bit like a clear lens, doesn't it? This is the method I use for all painting jewels or anything that needs to look like it's a lens, or in some cases vehicle canopies, windscreens, things like that. You can use the same effect on that. So again, a very small dot right in the corner. Not coming off very well there. Let's see if everyone thinks that looks pretty good. It's not quite as neat as I thought on his right hand eye, our left. But again, not a problem to tidy that up. I'm just going to take a bit of the blue and go around the edge. Well, let's get the going. Just put a tiny bit of blue around the edge of the eye socket. That'll neaten that up and also draw more of a contrast between the eye and the rest of the helmet. And we'll go around the other bit as well. There we are. Yeah, straight away, that's kind of fixed that problem there. Now, we need to get that little white dot in. We have another go. See if we can get that. Now, seems like the camera wiggles the wrong way. Let me just. That's got it. There we are. Right, what else have we done? So we've done that bit there, that bit there. We just need to tidy up the. Just doing maybe another coat of this bone effect, bone colour on here. Get nice and smooth. That's it. Anything else needs doing there? Not really. That's going to be taken up with the ink wash at the end. And obviously we can freehand some heraldry or some insignia on him later on. Right, we'll just leave that to dry and then we'll do our wash stages and then dry brush the base and he's done. Okay, now these are some items that you might not get in your base pack, but ones that you can easily acquire and add in. So a shade like Null Oil is quite a nice one. It's like a black ink. It's very watery, so do make sure you don't drop it anywhere. And the contrast range. And contrast paints are a bit of a mix between a paint and a wash or ink. They're quite a nice texture and consistency, and they tend to go better over whites. They're designed really to go over whites. And with the slap top method, which we might do in another video, you can see how very quickly you can do colours. The idea is that they basically do all three stages in one. They do the base, the shade, and the highlight with one application. This one's Skeleton Horde. It's great for skeletons. In fact, my own daughter uses it on her skeleton army. And it's a nice light brown colour. And what we're going to use is, just to show you how it works, we're going to use it on the parchment here. Now, you could do the parchment in a very light tan brown, or a dark brown, light brown, and build up the layers until you got that. That would take you a while, and it would look good, but a quicker way is, as we say, just to do it in a white, or indeed a skeleton bone colour. Then we're just going to take one application of the contrast paint, and if you watch when I just push it straight on, it instantly does all the shading and the highlighting in one stage. So it runs into the crevices, stays off the raised areas, and gives you that parchment effect pretty much instantaneously. Pretty nice that. Now, with this brown, you can also use it. It's actually quite good on metals and browns. So if we just test it here, we can put it over the gold. And of course, gold will do quite nicely with brown washes. So we can just run a bit of that around the gold areas, and that sort of deepens the gold effect a little. What I might do is just put it a bit on the Aquila as well. It might run into the gaps and just sort of dirty it up a bit, but also sort of warm the colour up a little. So let's put that on the belt buckle there as well, and just round the back here. There we go. Quick and simple that. It looks quite nice. Now, for the other areas, we're just going to give it a quick run over with some Null Oil. And that's literally just to do the shading. So again, it's very runny. It's more of an ink than a paint. What we're going to do is literally just run it into any of the recess areas, just to help contrast the highs and lows. So in this case, I'm going to just run it around these edges of these armour plates like that. Around the backs here, and again you see it basically runs into the crevices and runs off everywhere else. We'll use any of the areas where you've got that flexible, almost hose-like under armour. We'll put it under that bit there, under that bit there, and I'm just going to run it around there. You see it'll run into the detail and stay off the top. Now you can also run it like that, and then gently just run your finger off it to wipe the excess off. And you get quite a nice detail effect. See how that really makes some of the details pop quite well. Now I'm going to put some over this metal piece at the back here, so it looks like worn and warmed. And again, around the vents that we spoke about earlier. I'm just going to put some around here, just to help pick out the details, and the hose parts of the armour. We're going to just paint that onto there. That will sit and do all our shading and highlighting for us. A little bit lazy, but again, we're looking for quick tabletop standard. I'm just going to run it around those panels there, and on the underside of his hand, underside here, underside of the armour, and we're going to run it around the knee guard, the knee pad, like that, just to again help with contrasting the shade, and underneath the bits of the feet there as well. That'll do. You'll be a bit careful. You can just sort of splosh it all on and hope that it does work, but really it's a case of, if you paint it in carefully, the pin lining I think some people call it, if you paint it in carefully, it gives quite a nice effect. We can put a bit on the gun as well. Let's put some over the raised detail edges, and in the bit where the bolt is ejected, put some around the barrel at the end as well, just to sort of warm the colours up a bit and blend everything together. Put some on that scope. There we go. And what we're going to do is put a little bit on his face. We're going to keep away from the eyes, but just put it around the vents on the faceplate there. Again, just inside here we'll do. Oops, sorry, I'll show you. Here. Now remember, we just need to tidy up that edge there. We'll do that as well. So let's put some around the edge of the backpack and on any recessed areas of the backpack as well. And you know what? I think we could probably say that this, aside from some basing, is ready to take his place on the battlefield. Just get a little bit of blue and just re-edge that bit there. We can neaten and tidy up that area like that. Also just adds a little to the edge highlighting around the throat guard there. It just helps draw the attention more into the face area. Now again, you can start doing some extra highlights here. So on the, we get the light blue and go back to the light blue and just do along the edge of this piece of armour here, just to really see where the sharper edges of the armour might be. Just pick out tips of his fingers, again, just lightly dry brush that across the top. And any edges of any armour plate. Again, that thumb that we missed before, there we go. Tops of these bits here. And edges of any armour plates here. And all these top bits of the knee protectors. It can be done very, very, very bright blue, really, just to show how they pick out. Around the groin guard, the belt buckle, and maybe around the tips of the toes. Hope he's got his steel toe caps on. Health and safety is not an accident. I'll just put a bit more on there, just re-highlight that a little. Where it's gone a little bit darker. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. All told, pretty decent effect for around about an hour's worth of work. Now, once it's all dry, you could actually put a little bit of black ink or a shade just in the eye sockets, just around to help with the highlighting. Let's just put that on there. It shouldn't do too much, like that, just to pick them out. And for a very basic dry brush, I'm really quite pleased with him. So that is going to be it for now. We'll simply do a dry brush on the base. As you see, where it's caught with the blue, the first thing we'll probably do is just, again, re-blacken it. So we'll just get the black. And at this stage, you can be a little less precious with it. You can just splodge the black back in. and then we'll get probably a grey and then a lighter grey. Again, maybe just your normal black with white. Also, using contrast on bases works rather well. You could paint all this a light brown or a white, and then go over it in a light brown, in a brown contrast, or the grey contrast, or a black contrast, just to pick out the details. Obviously, that's with a textured base like this. You could also use, some bases come plain, and you could cover it in PVA glue with some sand, some flock, and there's incredible amounts of basing materials out there. You can get alien-esque plants, rocks, stones, crystals, gems, skulls, whatever you fancy. One thing I would say is don't go too mad on the basing, because an overdone base can detract from the model. So try and keep it themed within your army. So if you do a certain style of basing, make sure if you're doing a squad, all the bases match. At least if you're doing a basic colour and sand and flock, and that'll really tie any unit together and tie an army together and look really good. So we'll do that, and then we'll put up the final picture and see what we're up to. Well, we've neat and tidied the base up, so now we've just got a grey, bog standard grey, nothing mad. And again, wipe most of it off with a dry brush, and we're literally just going to flick that over the very nicely sculpted detail that I've put on there. That certainly helps us a lot. And you can build that up. So you start off with a dark grey, then maybe a middle grey, and then maybe even a very light grey, or even almost white. And once you've done that, keeping off the boots if you can, then the only thing you really need to do then is to add a little, either do around the rim black or brown, depending on what you fancy, and add a varnish if you like. A matte varnish is usually best. You can get them in spray form, but other than that, you're good to go. So we'll carry on doing that, finish that off, and there's all set for the tabletop. And here we have the finished article. The only thing we've added on here is some hand-drawn decals, well not really decals, some heraldry. Something simple there, just with a white and a little bit of writing on the parchment. But other than that, that's him ready for the tabletop to do battle in the Emperor's name. Thanks for watching.